Hello, we'd like to welcome our attendees as everyone slowly trickles in. Hi, everyone. Just giving just another few, like maybe 30 seconds or so as attendees start to pop in. All right. Looks like attendees have stopped trickling in, so I would like to get the session started. Welcome. It is the final session of the 2023 CUNY Accessibility Conference. My name is Claire Wilson, and I will be your moderator for this session with technical support from Ram Assessor. This session is titled The Impact of the Faculty Accessibility Fellows Program at SUNY Oswego, presented by Rebecca Mushtare. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to relay. This session will be recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you may keep your camera off and your microphone off, which is the default setting for the webinar. You may also change your name if you do not want your current name visible in the live transcript. Live transcription is active for this session. You may turn on captions by selecting Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you do not see this option, select More or stretch your window wider. ASL interpreting is also available for this session. Similar to captions, you may view the interpreters in a pop-up window by selecting Interpretation at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are using a screen reader, please adjust your alerts and notifications accordingly in your Zoom accessibility settings. The webinar settings allow for you to save the chat, so you can opt out of alerts during the presentation if you wish. I do know that our CUNY community is often chatty, so if you're afraid that there'll be a lot of chat notifications, you can silence those and then save the chat to review later. The presenter will take questions about 10 to 15 minutes before the end of the session. Please enter any questions into the Q&A at the bottom. The chat will not be closely monitored for questions, so we want to make sure that we address the questions that you have. If you require video to sign your question or microphone access to voice your question, please use the raise your hand reaction so that we can update your Zoom settings during the Q&A. We will let you know when it is time to speak or to sign. If you would like to share relevant resources or links with others, you may post that information into the chat. And lastly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please message the hosts in the chat so that our tech support team can do their best to assist. I'm going to post these housekeeping in the chat so that you can review those. And I will also be posting a link to the Google Slides of this presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Mushtare. Rebecca Mushtare is the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and a professor in the Department of Art and Design at SUNY Oswego. Rebecca co-founded the campus's work group on accessibility practices and has worked on a number of campus initiatives, including facilitating the first cohort of Faculty Accessibility Fellows and the 10-Day Accessibility Challenge. Recently, she has served on the SUNY Empowering Students with Disabilities Task Force and provided support for accessibility efforts within the Students Learn, Students Vote coalition. She earned her MFA in computer art at Syracuse and her BFA in graphic design from SUNY Oswego. So like CUNY, SUNY, loves their alum. The presentation is titled The Impact of the Faculty Accessibility Fellows Program at SUNY Oswego. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you for that introduction, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this conference every year. I also just want to share that Michelle Thornton is a kind of a co-collaborator on this project and helped put this presentation together, although she is not presenting with me today. And Michelle was one of our first cohort of faculty fellows in our program and has been really instrumental in helping us think about how to assess some of our accessibility efforts. And she's a faculty member in the Health Services Administration MBA program. So to give you a little overview of what I'm thinking for today's session, this is our kind of agenda. First, I'm going to provide an overview of our Faculty Accessibility Fellows program. I'll talk about how we funded the program and maybe ask others for other suggestions of how funding might happen if you want to start your own program. We'll talk about recruitment. We'll talk about how we onboard our fellows, and then also how we're starting to measure the impact of this program, which is in its 5th year. So first, we'll start kind of with the overview of the program. So to give you a little context of what has happened at SUNY Oswego around accessibility is that we started offering digital accessibility workshops regularly through our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching in 2014. And I was the one starting with those materials and those workshops. I teach in our design program, so accessibility is a fundamental skill that our students learn. And so I was sharing what I was doing in the classroom with my colleagues. Eventually, I was the associate director of the teaching center, and I leveraged that role to create with our instructional designers on campus the work group on accessibility practices. This group has been really foundational and at our campus on our efforts because it brings a lot of different folks from across campus together to work on accessibility issues on our campus. So when this group was first founded, it had the teaching center, instructional designers, and our web services team, right? The folks who manage our website and that kind of thing. And then slowly it grew to involve folks from the library, our computer technology services folks, et cetera. And essentially that group has just evolved over time, our disability services staff, et cetera. So there's representations from a wide variety of folks on campus as well as faculty now. It's taken time. And when this group first started, we were lucky to get connected to our chief technology officer who sat on this committee for quite a while in its early stages. And I think you'll see over time why that was an important relationship for the faculty to establish. In 2017, the CTO, so that same individual, started the Digital Accessibility Steering Committee on our campus, which started to kind of bring the work group together with kind of senior level administrators, as well as folks from our web steering team and procurement team, so that we had a way to coordinate, right? So this is really our campus coordination group, and that's important to the history of the Fellows Program. And then 2 years later, in 2019, the work group proposed the Faculty Accessibility Fellows Program, which really is about bringing faculty into the fold across disciplines and involve them in our efforts. So that makes this our 5th year. So the purpose of the program was to support and engage our faculty in campus accessibility efforts, both as teachers and as researchers. So we wanted them to think about the role accessibility plays in their teaching, making sure that their materials and things are accessible and the experiences they create are accessible, but also to leverage the expertise that we were hoping they build and share that with our students and start training our students to adopt accessible practices as well. We also know that our faculty are researchers, and we wanted to involve them in developing research opportunities around digital accessibility. We also wanted our real goal here was to promote a campus culture that really values inclusivity, equity, and accessibility. Many campuses have DEI efforts, and as many of you know, accessibility is often left out, and we didn't want that to happen on our campus. So this was really an opportunity to expand our campus infrastructure to incorporate accessibility and really involve the faculty so it gets embedded in the curriculum and the full student experience. We saw our faculty fellows serving the following roles. We wanted them to advocate for accessibility throughout campus. We wanted them to learn and explore. So that included digital accessibility and the technical side of it, but also things like inclusive pedagogy and universal design for learning, which are all part of developing an inclusive campus. We wanted them to develop and share accessibility expertise specific to their discipline. So we were really active in recruiting faculty across our institution, from math, chemistry, design, music, right? A wide swath of individuals, because there's complexities involved with making different kinds of materials and experiences accessible. And we wanted to offer the time and resources to help faculty explore what that meant in their discipline. We also saw the fellows being important to coaching colleagues and students to help adopt these practices. And then we also wanted to make sure that accessibility was connected to these broader DEI initiatives, and involving a wide variety of faculty who are involved in different kinds of initiatives was really important to this effort. Our fellows sign on for a year. So we set it up to be a calendar year. And this has really served us well, because then the summer is in the middle. And so after they learn some skills, techniques, and start being introduced to theory and as well as the practice, they have an opportunity to really think about, reflect upon this work, and build it into their fall courses. So the calendar year starting in January has worked out well for us. The expectation is about 120 hours of time. The program includes professional development, partly in the form of this onboarding that happens in January, and then followed by weekly meetings throughout each semester. Typically it's weekly, sometimes it's bi-weekly, depending on how big the group is and what the group decides is helpful to them. Typically this means we want folks to attend at least 8 per semester. They were required to update at least one of the courses they teach to fully embrace accessible and inclusive practices. They were expected to meet with their colleagues to inform them of accessible practices and to coach them through what that means in the work that they do. We offered some workshops following the fellowship year. So after they complete the program, we expected them to participate in developing workshops for faculty across our campus in that following year. And then they were also required to submit an interim report halfway through, so at the start of the summer, and then again at the end of the calendar year, reflecting upon their practice and documenting what they have achieved. The program involves a coordinator And I acted as that first kind of coordinator or facilitator of the program. And that person's responsible for planning the onboarding of the new cohort of fellows. We facilitate weekly meetings and support kind of fellows in the work that they're doing. That person co-chairs the work group on accessibility practices that I mentioned earlier, and they co-chair that with a staff member, so that we are kind of representing different sectors of our campus, and they fulfill slightly different responsibilities in that role. And then that coordinator also collects the interim and final reports and also helps to recruit the next cohort of fellows. And typically the coordinator is a former fellow, except for the first year, in which case I served as the coordinator. So I guess the other thing that I might mention here is that the fellows program has included anywhere from 2 to 8 fellows, but our goal is typically 4 fellows, 1 from each of our 4 schools across campus. So we have the School of Education, the Business School, the School of Communication, Media, the Arts, and our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So typically we try to have at least 1 representative from each of those schools. So a question I always get is like, how do you fund this, right? Which is something that we always want to kind of do. So the costs associated here are really a few things. First, the cost of the fellows, which includes a course release or extra service pay for 1 course per year, right? So they're involved for a year. We need to either pay an adjunct to allow them to have a course release, or we're paying them extra service in the equivalent amount of adjunct pay. And we provide some travel funding so that they can either upskill in the field of accessibility in their discipline, or to present some of the research or accessibility practices within their discipline. We also have a coordinator. That coordinator, as you might recall, not only facilitates the cohort of fellows, but also co-chairs our work group on accessibility practices. So that person receives a course release or extra service pay for 1 course per semester. So there's a difference there between the fellows and the coordinator. And then we also have heavily relied on some of the other institutional support that we already had in place through the work group and the work of our steering committee, which includes a campus subscription to DQ University, which like the SUNY system is paying for at our institution. We have the Grackle add-on for our Google Suite. We're a Google campus, and Google software does not have any accessibility checkers, and so Grackle is an add-on essentially that provides that feature. We relied on our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and the regular professional development opportunities offered through that center. And we worked with them to provide that with the expertise of the work group. So that means that we have professional development every year in January and every year in May, and we worked with that timing. And then we also, our campus has invested in Blackboard Ally, and now we're a Brightspace campus and we have Ally there as well, but we use that as a tool on our campus as well. So those things were also in place, and our fellowship takes advantage of all of those things. So that's part of our cost. So that's the cost. So I'd love for folks to take a moment. I'm trying to be a little interactive here. If you have an opportunity and you want to use the chat, where do you think the funding came from? This is not an inexpensive thing, right? But it's not super expensive either. There's a cost associated with it. When we run with 4 fellows and we have our travel funds, et cetera, and we're not including those additional institutional costs because that was kind of already funded, we're looking at like $27,000 to $30,000. Where would you ask for the money? So there's a question in the chat, like, did you start with a grant? That would be that's definitely a way people could get money. Any other ideas of where you might go? I'll tell you a secret. Student activities, that's a good one too. They have a lot of money. That's a good place to get money. So yeah, that's another great place to look. Our funding stream, which is all for faculty, mind you, right? Like this is all faculty that our main cost is coming from our Chief Technology Officer. And that's because we invited him to join our work group at the beginning, and he thought this was really important to our efforts on campus. So really our funding primarily comes from our computer technology services, or Chief Technology Officer's budget, right? He budgets for it every year. And then that's supported and some additional funds through the provost office and academic affairs. And there is the more kind of people high up in the food chain, right, at an institution that buy into these efforts, they can find resources for us if they can see how we can demonstrate meaningful impact. And our Chief Technology Officer has been so incredibly supportive of these efforts. So building these relationships has been really important. And remember, I noted that I started that relationship building in 2014, and then I didn't ask for the money until 2019. Right? So it took time to get to that place. And, you know, him and I continue to do a lot of things together and lean on each other for support in these efforts. So that's been really important to us in our efforts on our campus. And probably a surprising funding source. So now I want to share a little bit about our recruitment of fellows strategy. So our initial cohort, right, before we had a program, this was our very first program. We say, we're going to have this faculty accessibility fellows program. We have to describe it, and then we have to convince people they want to join us. It's a bit different than now, 5 years later, where people kind of know what the program is. So in our initial cohort, we did have it a little larger than our average cohort in that first year. So we had a few extra individuals. We leveraged the interest that there was, and our Chief Technology Officer found some extra funding for us so that we could do that. And I think that made a big impact because we could see bigger results because we had a slightly bigger cohort after that first year. That helped with like kind of brand recognition of the program. We specifically asked and recruited faculty that we thought had influence, people who had been a bit established, and also people who were newer, but clearly had been building their own relationships on campus. We were really looking for a wide range of disciplines. We wanted people who were equity-minded, maybe had no kind of technical skill, right? And maybe really unfamiliar with the idea of digital accessibility, but they were already equity-minded. So they already had kind of the emotional connection to the effort, and that we could help them build some skill sets. After that time, we've kind of adapted some of our strategy. So we use campus-wide recruitment announcements late spring for the following year. So we have our call out for our 2024 fellows already. And the reason for this is because we need to make sure when we're involving faculty that we think about the curriculum schedule building, right? So on our campus, the spring schedule, so spring of 2024 schedule is getting built over the summer. So that means that we need to know who our fellows are if we want them to be able to take advantage of course releases and things like that so departments can plan. So that was a really important shift that happened over time. We've done personalized outreach. So that means kind of our work group and our steering committee talk to deans, talk to chairs, talk to former fellows, and then leverage those relationships to invite new people into the fold. We do send out kind of these campus-wide recruitments, and we get some hits on that, but it's really this personalized outreach that's much more important. We typically try to reach out to folks who are already involved in some DEI work, but maybe haven't been involved in accessibility work. And then we regularly offer presentations about the fellowship program during our professional development workshop series, both in January and in May. I see a question in our Q&A about DQ, and the question is, did your CTO also fund the DQ memberships as well? And how many folks are included in the annual membership, faculty, departments, etc.? We were fortunate enough that the SUNY CTOs put a request together for SUNY to pay for DQ. And anyone who had wanted access on our campus has been able to get it without our campus having to fund it. Okay, so where are we here? I think we're ready to move on. So I wanted to share with you some of our recruitment. So on the screen is our two charts, and on the left is a chart representing kind of our fall 2021 first year students to give you an idea of what the demographics of our students are. Our biggest school at our institution is our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is about 43% of our incoming students. The next biggest group is the School of Business at 18%. Our School of Communication, Media, and the Arts is at 16%. Our School of Education is at 15%, and we have about 8% undeclared students. Next to that chart is a representation of the accessibility fellows by school over the last 5 years. And what you can see is that the proportion is roughly the same. So we've had about 46% of our fellows have been in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, 18% in the School of Communication, Media, and the Arts, 18% in the School of Education, and 18% in the School of Business. And obviously that was intentional to kind of mirror our students so that we have good representation of our faculty that represent our student population as well. We've had a wide range of fellows represented from a wide range of departments. So in our kind of first 5 years, we've had fellows from art and design, anthropology, biology, chemistry. We've had 3 from curriculum and instruction, English, health promotion and wellness, 4 fellows from business management and marketing, math, Native American studies, music, political science, psychology, sociology, Spanish, and theater. And because we have actively recruited across the campus, we basically have advocates everywhere, right? Every committee you're on campus, there's one of our fellows somewhere to be nearby, right? So this strategy has worked really well. Our fellows, if we look at kind of this first 5 years of fellows, and we look at their ranks, we can see that the largest group has been assistant professors, which have been about 10 of our 22 fellows. Our next biggest group is associate professors, which has been 6 of our 22 fellows. We've had 5 full professors and 1 visiting assistant professor. We typically don't recruit visiting assistant professors unless we know they have a more long-term contract, because the institution wants to invest in folks that we're already committed to. So you'll notice still rank across, a wide range of ranks. This is important to our strategy as well, in terms of making sure that we're recruiting people that have a variety of different kinds of influence on our campus. So who makes a good fellow? Would love to hear who you think might make a good fellow in the chat. I love hearing other thoughts. It might also help us with our recruitment strategies. And if you want to start a program like this at your institution, it might help with yours as well. Here's what we've been looking for. Largely people who are committed to principles of equity, accessibility, inclusivity, and student success. I see some nice suggestions in the chat. Curious professors, someone with good relationships in the department, willing to jump right in. Yes, yes, yes. People who are willing to grow, right, or just open to change are key people. If people are so set in their pedagogical practices and aren't willing to self-examine, these are not good candidates for this program. And then we want them to be able and willing to advocate, lead, influence, and model. And I think those strong action verbs really represent what we expect of our fellows and that we try to empower them to be able to do. I'm sharing, you may or may not be familiar with the diffusion of innovation model. You can read up on it if you're not familiar. But essentially, it talks about how people adopt new technologies. And I think it really models people adopting new practices generally, right? So the model here basically shows that there's a really small group of innovators, right, who might start, like they're the ones that are going to get involved first. And they're about 2.5% of our population, right? Then we might move on to early adopters who are more like 13.5%. Then there's the early majority of 34%, late majority, 34%, and then the laggards, which are maybe 16%. In our initial recruitment, we focused primarily on innovators, like people who are really open, right? And we can see us maturing. So I would say right now, when I look at the landscape of our fellows and who's been involved in our work group, for example, on our campus, we're seeing folks now in that early majority. So we can see that we're kind of maturing in our practices here, and we're starting to reach different people. That does mean that our program has evolved to reflect the people that are in it, right? So we've had to involve more disability studies work as part of the curriculum that we offer our participants early on to help them understand the why of the work that we're doing. And we're really hoping that we're going to continue adopting these early majority and maybe start moving into the late majority folks. The laggards are going to be folks that we're not necessarily going to recruit for this program, but we're hoping that by having this wide network of fellows across campus, that slowly, when everyone else is already doing the thing, that smaller population of individuals will kind of feel pressured into having to do it as well. We want everyone to want to do it, but we know that won't happen. So hopefully the peer pressure will help with that particular group. I really love some other things that I'm seeing in the chat here too about understanding the human component and really thinking about how to learn. And I love that book by Barbara Oakley that's mentioned in the chat. So how do we onboard our fellows? Well, we do this in January. So we're recruiting ahead of time. Hopefully we have those all in place in the summer, maybe early fall at the very latest. Although, if we don't have someone from a particular school represented, we'll leave that spot open until we can find someone from the school to fill that seat. But typically our onboarding activities happen in January. There's a self-study component where we assign and recommend some specific DQ University courses. And if you're not familiar with that program, it's really wonderful training on the technical side, primarily the technical side. There's some other components too, of accessibility practices. So we introduce them through those courses and self-study. We also offer some specific readings, helping folks understand the difference between accessibility, accommodations, and introducing them to kind of the field of disability studies. And then we also have on our campus, through our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, a 2-week period in January where our campus expects people to be doing professional development. They regularly offer over 100 workshops during this period of time, and the work group on accessibility practices provides some of that workshop during that time. And so the fellows training is built into those pre-scheduled workshops and this time that we're already kind of expecting professional development to happen on our campus. We also last year at this conference shared our 10-day accessibility challenge, which also happens at that time frame. And so we engage our fellows in that accessibility challenge too, as an entree into the work that they'll be doing in the year of being a fellow. One of the things to maintain funding, and funding is always the thing, right? Resources are key to these efforts, is measuring impact. And this is where Michelle has been really helpful in our work, is really getting us to think about different ways we can measure impact. So we want to share some of those practices with you as well. So first, the fellowship meetings, those regular meetings that we have built into the program, provide a really important feedback loop. During this time, in real time, Our participants are sharing their experiences with the facilitator and with each other. And then they're identifying barriers that they're facing, things that they're struggling with. And then kind of the curriculum and next week's plans can be adjusted based on what the participants share. The meetings are a great time for participants to ask questions, to share their progress. And one of the things that we have learned in kind of the work that we're doing right now to assess our program is that we do not emphasize enough the wins people have, right? These meetings are a good opportunity to celebrate the wins, but we often focus in on like, I'm struggling with this, or I'm experiencing this barrier, I technologically can't figure out how to do X. And what we really need to do is highlight, you made your syllabus accessible. This is so good. Share it with your colleagues. And so we want to build in that excitement a little bit more into those meetings. It's also an opportunity for us to frame the work that we're doing in terms of ableism and as well as disability studies, right? And providing that more kind of theoretical foundation for our fellows. And then also to frame accessibility practices within inclusive pedagogy more broadly. And again, I noted here, like it's a need for celebration, but definitely a place where we could improve on our campus. I also mentioned that we have kind of an interim and final report that we request of our participants. And these are really offered at the end of each semester. So at the end of the spring semester and again at the end of the fall semester. And we ask a variety of questions, including how many, like their approximate hour commitment per week that they've spent and on what types of activities related. So are they doing readings and researching things? Are they actually doing like remediating some things that they've created previously? Are they creating new materials with accessibility in mind? Like what are they doing? We asked them to share some example documents of things that they've created for their courses that meet accessibility standards. We asked them about their overall satisfaction so we can improve our program and where they might see some suggestions for improvement. And then we also asked them about kind of the personal impact the experiences had on them. So I want to just share a couple of samples from the kinds of things that we've read to really demonstrate the really meaningful impact this experience has had for our faculty fellows, in part because they're really formulating a nice close-knit group of peers who are committed to this work and they can bounce ideas off of. So one of our participants said, it gave me a greater understanding of student needs, even ones who do not identify as needing accessibility. It also helped my teaching by making me think through everything that I created. I realized that teaching is more than just being in the classroom, but to reach every student, I need to find ways to make all students included. Who doesn't want that win, right? This is so important. And here's just another sample. The fellowship has had a strong impact on my teaching philosophy with regard to inclusion. It has also sparked my interest in learning more about accessibility with regard to mental health and various accommodations that may need to be made for students with diverse abilities. It's really incredible to see people reflect on their practices and how much a fellowship like this impacts their teaching and their interactions with students generally and with their colleagues. One of the measures we've started looking at is Ally. And Ally is a tool for course management systems that essentially provides an accessibility checker, right? It can check the things that are built right in the learning management system, as well as attachments like PDFs or Word documents or PowerPoint or whatever that you might have kind of attached as well. And what we have seen is that our courses taught by fellows, and there's like a scoring system, right? So the courses taught by fellows had an Ally score, an overall Ally score of about 81%. And if we look at all the other courses that are not taught by fellows, that number is more like 67%, right? So we can see that it's not perfect, but we certainly have a lot of progress being made with the fellows and the work that they're doing. The other thing that's important to note here is that fall 22, that where we collected this particular data from, is our first semester in a brand new learning management system. So we had Blackboard and we moved to Brightspace. Our first semester on board with Brightspace was fall 2022. So this is encouraging. It's not terrible. It's not catastrophic. Some great improvements here, but this is also considering that everyone had to learn the learning management system as well, as learn kind of the practices that we were hoping they would adopt. So we think that this is pretty good improvement. We also looked at the fellows in the departments that they're in. So again, with this ally data from fall 22. So if we looked at departments that have fellows in them, and they are of various scope and size, when it was a department with a fellow, their overall ally score was about 77%. If we look at a department without fellows, that number was closer to 70%. So this is a meaningful difference, right? Because some of these departments are humongous. And so the impact that one fellow might be making could actually be fairly significant. What we've been engaging in most recently are one-on-one interviews. We're doing a study with our fellows, and we have interviewed 15 out of 16 of the participants from the first 3 years of the programs about their experiences. We have a series of, like a structured interview with a series of questions. They're about 30 to 45 minutes. We started those interviews in summer 22 and continued them again, picked up and try to get the rest of the group that we didn't get the first time in spring 2023. And we just wrapped those up. And we're using the transcripts essentially to identify themes. And what we have learned from these is how much we didn't know about what our fellows are doing and the impact that the program was having. We just didn't have a mechanism to collect information after they'd been out of the fellowship program for a while. So our first cohort has been out of the fellowship for 4 years, and it's really interesting to see the impacts that it has made. And so I have just some preliminary highlights to share with you. Michelle and I are working on really documenting this in a manuscript, but I wanted to share some highlights to just give you a sense of the kind of work that our fellows have been doing. So first of all, we learned that our fellows are advocates who are very modest, right? They've contributed to this work in such a wide variety of ways, many of which we had no idea about. We learned that our fellows across a wide variety of disciplines have integrated learning about accessibility into their courses. So this means having assignments where accessibility or accessible materials was required. From chemistry to design to education, it's happening across a wide variety of disciplines, and that is very exciting to us. And we had no idea. We've learned that our fellows have shared their work both formally and informally in training their peers and departments on campus, but also through their, have trained their colleagues through professional organizations and conferences, both in and outside of academia, right? So they're really impacting their disciplines, whether or not it's the kind of the professional side of the discipline or the more academic side of the discipline. Impact has been had. For example, one colleague shared that they were able to offer an impromptu workshop on accessibility practices at a conference when attendees indicated they were in need of technical training. Amazing, right? Another colleague has been working with professionals in the field to improve their professional practices in the healthcare industry, right? This is amazing. And then others have worked on research projects and published the results. So this was really exciting, and many of these we didn't necessarily know about. Fellows are also influencing others in a variety of ways, including building practices within their programs, departments, and committees. For example, like requiring documents to be accessible, like syllabi, agendas, minutes, emails, handbooks. And, the way they have done that has often been a bit quiet. right? So for example, they might offer to take notes in a meeting, set up a nice accessible template, and then request the group that they're a part of to adopt that template moving forward. And these are incredibly powerful ways to model these practices and to make the practices more widestream, more adopted, more widestream. Our colleagues have been awarded grants to improve our library's collection of resources on disability and accessibility. They've gotten grants to support student researchers on research projects that they were doing around accessibility practices, and are currently pursuing funding to build more resources for our campus and colleagues. Personally, as a co-founder of this program, I found it interesting to see how many of our fellows have moved into leadership roles and how they're using that power to cultivate a culture of accessibility throughout the campus and beyond. We've also had a number of our fellows leave the institution. They've moved to other institutions, and we were able to follow up with those, and some who've left academia altogether. And it's incredible to hear the ways that this work is still really providing meaning for them, and that they are still really engaged in this work in a variety of ways beyond the fellowship years. And as we kind of wrap up, I just want to share a little bit of what we're thinking about in terms of the future of the Fellows Program at Oswego. So we're always seeking kind of coverage of our fellows across a wide variety of programs. So we're trying to insert ourselves into some new departments. We're engaged in this kind of continuous improvement and revision model. And this is really important as we think about how the demographics of our fellows are changing, our experience, especially the experience level that they might have with this work. We're also, as an institution, working on adapting our 10-day challenge that we've implemented on our campus, so that it's in our Brightspace learning management system. And we're really looking forward to having contributions from our fellows across the wide variety of disciplines to address various kind of nuances that they have unraveled as they've done their work. And then we're also exploring what a fellowship program or kind of related program might look like for adjunct faculty, staff, or maybe even what an advanced fellowship kind of strategy might look like for people who have been engaged in this work. And I will also say that what's often next for fellows is adopting them into leadership roles. So becoming maybe the next leader of the fellows, or getting them involved in our work group or steering committee on campus, and keeping them engaged and connected to other colleagues who are doing this work. And that's all I have to share for you today. And I'm really happy to engage with questions, and hope that this is helpful for folks. And maybe this is something you want to implement on your campus. And if I can help you do that, please ask away.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I mean, obviously we had a lot of good feedback in the chat, in part based on your questions, kind of like proposing, what do you think, who do you think would be good candidates? What are we looking for? And so we will begin the Q&A. I feel that we've covered the things that ended up in the Q&A, but I encourage people to keep posting or raise your hand or post something in the chat. I do have one question about the data that you gathered in Ally, because Ally feels like the perfect thing. It's a proof of concept both for your initiative and also for using Ally.
Yes.
And so when you did the data this year, did you include just the fellows who were fellows for 2002, or did you or 22, or did you include the past fellows also? Because I'd be interested to see that number too.
Yeah, we included all fellows who have completed the program.
Gotcha. Great.
Just none of them. So the cohort that started this year are not included because they haven't had the full year of experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do we have any other questions? out there. I know that there's been just a little bit of dialogue. Like some people saying like, oh, I wonder if CUNY has access to DQ in the same way.
Yeah, just tell CUNY that SUNY has it, and then
Yeah,
maybe.
I actually wrote that down. I'm like, we are, we have a, a group of disability services managers and directors across CUNY, and that's the type of thing that we want to take to our central office.
Yes.
Um,
I'm also really happy if anyone's really interested in pursuing work like this. We are a very sharing campus. And so if there's additional materials I can share with you, you are welcome to reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat.
yeah, I mean, this feels like a very doable initiative in that you know, finding someone to cover, getting a one course credit, is not the hardest thing to pull
No.
off. To pull off. I mean, you're not even in a hiring freeze. We don't have to hire a person to manage this. It's using the people, the human resources that we already have.
Yeah, and what we've really cultivated is a field of experts on not experts on everything accessibility, but like each person has a little bit of expertise, and we use our work group to solve problems. So if something arises for someone, we bring it to the work group, and then the work group sees if the expertise is in the room, and if not, we reach out to our colleagues across campus that we've worked with, and then we also have a network of SUNY colleagues that we also work with, to like when our problems are bigger than we can handle.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're creating these relationships too, which as we know how that works out, sometimes it can work out fantastically.
Yes, I highly recommend befriending your chief technology officer, rising ally, because they're responsible for digital accessibility as well on campuses. So they're a good ally, and not necessarily the first person that you think of recruiting and as a partner.
Sure, sure. I mean, and if for anybody who wasn't quite aware, CUNY had been piloting Blackboard Ally for a few semesters, and it went live for the whole university this semester.
That's exciting.
So yes, so if you be sure to check that out. And let me see here. Oh, we have a question from SD1. Let's see here. How do you handle complex course materials such as math and science?
Yeah, I think the tool that we have relied on our campus is MathML. And I can give you a shout out for the person on our campus who does a lot of that work, whose name is Casey Raymond. And if you'd like me to connect you to that person, I would be happy to.
Yeah, I know that is particularly for readers. Like that's a kind of a big concern. It continuously comes up. I know that there are other things out there like Equatio, I think is one of them. I know that CUNY is actually our CUNY Assistive Technology Services are researching various ones in hopes of an adoption of a math reader solution.
Yeah.
And they're currently working on that, but yeah, and then I think the person had asked who your the contact information for your MathML person.
Yeah, he's great. And I know he spent a lot of time, so it's Casey Raymond, and he spent quite a bit of time, he's in chemistry, looking at a wide variety of solutions, right? And he settled on MathML as what we would adopt for our campus in the research that he did as a fellow. And when you're using MathML, it does make formulas and things accessible. So that's what that's for. And we have, I think there's like an add-on. I don't know the exact language because I'm in the arts, so this isn't directly applicable to what I do. But I do know that we like purchased an add-on or whatever we needed so that we could use it inside of our Google platform, and we could use it inside of Brightspace, et cetera. So I think there were some tools that we needed to purchase initially, but I also feel like I heard him say that perhaps those materials are now free or something like that. So he would know. You should talk to him.
Yeah, the math and equations in general are kind of a difficult lift for at least parts of accessibility.
Yeah. I am also looking while we're chatting. I think we might have a tutorial on how to use it on our campus. So I'm just looking to see if we have one that's publicly available. I don't see one, but I think I know he has one. And I'm sure he would share it. Anything else? Well, like I said, if anyone wants to reach out to me because they're interested in this program, I can connect you to the folks on our campus who might be the best person to answer the questions you might have. Thanks for your engagement. And I love hearing what folks at CUNY are doing as well. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to share.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we CUNY and SUNY are often operating kind of separately, but we also come together, particularly with regards to the Disability Services Council and things like that. So we are always learning from each other. And it's nice to see, I know that SUNY is often set up in a way that you operate largely independently and then have kind of the central, and CUNY, we're so close to each other sometimes. It's hard, the lines get blurred, like what is a university initiative, what's a campus initiative. I happen to work on a campus where it's the graduate the PhD granting institution, and so most of our faculty actually have other home campuses and they come just to teach grad classes at our institution. So was thinking, oh, how could we do fellows? And I was like, wait a minute, 75% of our faculty aren't actually from our campus. So how do you manage that kind of thing? Maybe it has to be institution wide or be done on other campuses for us to see the benefits of it. But I do think it's a really great initiative to have, to get buy-in with the faculty.
It's made.
Yeah, because it goes both ways. Like the faculty influence up and down.
That's precisely our strategy, Claire.
That's yes.
You're looking behind the curtain, I see.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like but that is kind of the instinctive thing, is like who can go both directions. So
yeah. And we all have different positionality and leverage and power within our institutions and organizations. And there's ways we can do things like this in little and big ways. And so maybe we're positioned to do a little thing, but that little thing might make a big difference using some of the same strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And are there any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you so much. I think that will conclude our session for today. And thank you, Rebecca, for presenting from SUNY Oswego. And thank you everyone for coming. We hope you enjoyed our 2-day conference on the future of accessibility. And this is really just a great example of it. Giving faculty just a few resources to take with them into the future, and how it has this ripple effect. Registered attendees will receive a survey. We would greatly appreciate any feedback that you can give. In a couple weeks, there will be a follow-up email with information about the recordings. We just need the time to make sure everything's captioned properly. Also, check the event email you received for a discount code for the Real Abilities Film Festival this weekend. So, if you weren't able to attend and see a couple of the short films that screened yesterday, you can participate in the film festival. I think there are some that are online as well as in person throughout all 5 boroughs. So thank you very much for attending the 14th Annual CUNY Accessibility Conference. Thank you so much.